for the first time this year, unless, you're a Corn Hub enjoyer, of which Josh is very much in fact, I believe multiple Late Kick Josh staff members have Corn Hub merchandise. If you're a Corn Hub enjoyer, sure, you may be watching the Big Ten. Otherwise, the Big Ten just kind of happens in the background for the vast majority of the season. And we show up, we're like, oh, look at that. Michigan beat the fuck out of someone. And then we're like, oh, that's kind of impressive. Whatever. But we finally got our first battle between the triumvirate this last Saturday. Ohio State, Penn State, two all-world defenses going up against each other. But I don't know, man. Now you look up and all of a sudden, what is James Franklin? 1-8 in these games against Ohio State. I think he's 3-13 in games against top 10 opponents. And to me, the call before half in the red zone, 3rd and 6, down 7 to run the ball. So basically, I think it was an inside zone. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and watch it. But just a basic soft ass, scared ass, conservative ass run on 3rd and 6 in the red zone on a night when you just didn't have those scoring opportunities. It tells me everything I need to know about James Franklin's ceiling.
Okay. Is that a question, or do you just want me to basically
just go right off of that? You digest it, and you feel it.
Am I right or wrong? Am I being overly critical here?
You're not being overly critical. No. Okay. So this is going to be a boring answer from me. It's not wrong. None of that's wrong. So we took a trip up there in the spring, and they flush all the local media out, and then they say, "Come on." So they let us watch practice. So I stood up on that balcony up there right outside his office. I watched practice. They tried incessantly to stress pushing the ball down the field vertically that day. They had a new transfer receiver coming in. They weren't happy with their perimeter skill as it exited spring, or as it was going to exit spring. And so I was asking a lot of the staffers, like, how do you feel about this? And they said, we got a championship caliber team. We have no clue what we're going to be on the outside. We do not know if we got pass catchers. And there's no more maybe. They just don't. They don't have that. And the Cephas kid from Kent State hasn't worked out. He's barely played. So they just you saw timidity, which is a word of the day for me. I'm trying to insert it in a sentence every day this week. You saw timidity. I think what they were was terrified at making that one mistake that goes the other way that felt like it was going to decide that game. Now, that doesn't mean what you said and how you described it is inaccurate. It just, and here's the buzz phrase of the decade, it just is what it is at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you want to go down swinging though, Josh. I mean,
I told you this yesterday, T-Bob. You also don't want to put the ball, like Josh said, you want to put the ball in guys' hands that aren't elite playmakers. Like, these were moments where you had to put the ball into your best players' hands and hope they can find a way to make a play. That's what Ohio State did with Marvin Harrison Jr. Big players step up in big games. You don't have big play guys on the outside for Penn State. You can't just force feed guys if they're not going to be able to find a way to get open. They didn't do it all day. So I want to ask you the difference with the teams.
Fuck it, and just accept that you're going to lose. I mean, then what are you going to do? If you're not going to go for the win, if you're not going to,
your best players are your running backs.
You're not going to be able to overcome.
Your best players are your linebackers. Like I thought they were waiting on. I thought both sides honestly felt like they were waiting on their best scoring opportunities, which were when their defenses were on the field. That's what it felt like. I was at that Ohio State Notre Dame game. That game felt the same. Both sides really, really timid. And aside from Marvin Harrison occasionally, who you can just account to get open because he's an alien, we're not really going to force it. We're going to wait on them, and hopefully they try and force it and we take advantage of it. And that really didn't happen.
Well, I mean, it almost did, though, right? I mean, if you want to defend James Franklin, like, they had the moment, but it was once again the skill of Marvin Harrison that was just unlike anybody else. Oh, Maserati Marv cranking it up, drawing the holding penalty, calling back the touchdown. I still think we'll have to agree to disagree on the timidity. I get what y'all are saying. Like, you can't just force one of these receivers to be good, but you got to take a shot at some point. You got to grab your balls. You got to put yourself out there.
Josh, I want to ask you this because you were there and we always talk about like guys walking off the bus. How do they look? How did the players look? We know there's a major gap between skill guys. Ohio State's always had receivers. They've always had the quarterback guy. They have the receivers again this year, and they were even without some of their starters as well on offense. Where was Penn State dominant in your mind? Like looking at players, could you point to a position? Because Ohio State's defense is legit. Could you point to a position and say Penn State was better there watching those two teams on Saturday?
Olu Fashanu at left tackle fits in anywhere. He'd play almost anywhere, and he's got the double knee brace, Stone Cold Steve Austin thing going on, as so many offensive linemen do. He looks the part. I think their linebacker room looks the part. Their receivers, though, don't. Here's what stands out. You both know this. I don't think a lot of folks watching who haven't been around teams and seen them in person know this. When you think of receivers and you see their height weight, you see 6'1", 180. And you think, oh, there's a dude I work with who's 6'1", 180. Receivers don't look like the dude you work with. They look really big because I don't know what it is, bone density. I don't know if it's weight distribution, but 6'1", 180 for an elite future first or second round D1 athlete looks way different. They don't have guys at receiver who look like that. They look like ordinary receivers, whereas Ohio State's dudes look exactly how you think Ohio State's dudes look. But Penn State, like they don't really physically take a back seat. I remember, dude, when we were at the national title game last year and you see TCU get off the bus, that's night and day. That's like the most glaring physical. What's this high school team? Is it a field trip to go visit a college team? That's what that looked like. It doesn't look like anything like that. But if you go position unit for position unit, it's really obvious. Ohio State's got dudes who are going to play on Sunday. Penn State has dudes who are going to watch Ohio State's dudes play on Sunday one day.
Well, and let's talk then about Ohio State, because I don't want to make this all about Penn State, even though I'm a bit frustrated there. But I could go either way with my Ohio State take here, where, clearly Michigan's the big winner here because J.J. McCarthy is light years better than Kyle McCord, and Michigan's going to roll over Ohio State once again. But I do see an Ohio State defense that appears to be much improved this season. And they looked very legit. I mean, just as good as Penn State's defense on Saturday. You've won 2 uber important, hyper close physical games. I mean, you always haven't seen Ohio State do in the past. And so, and they've been much better. Remember what got them last year against Michigan, the big plays, right? They basically haven't given up any all year long. Do you come out of this more bullish on Ohio State as it relates to Michigan, or less, or more bearish?
Much more bullish. I already was. This is just another exclamation on a point that I've expected to be able to make this year about them. And that is after the Michigan game last year, really, it was time to do a full forensic audit of your program, not your team, your program. How are we wired? And why do we look like the second most physical team against our biggest rival 2 years in a row? So then they happen to get in the playoff. But that's a game played in the 40s as well. I mean, you put 40 on the board, you still can't win because Georgia scores 1 or 2 more points than you. So then you really get into getting ready for spring. You're going to overhaul any staffers. You're going to have guys exit. You're going to bring a recruiting class in. You're going to do whatever you do in the transfer portal. I think they got really intentional after last year about never having that said about them again. Maybe they lose games, but it's not going to be because we got put on skates. There's no excuse for that. We're Ohio State. There's no excuse for that. So it just so happens that you also watch a guy like CJ Stroud walk out the door, and you watch quarterbacks like that walk out the door, and you don't have one to put in his place. But what that does is it also backs you into a corner as a team. And in spring, if you don't have an elite quarterback, you know it. And your team knows it. Bama's players knew it coming out of spring. If we win, it's going to be because we, on this side, defensive side of the ball, we step up. And it's almost like a survivalist mentality, even going into fall camp. And this is, to me, the big takeaway about Ryan Day. As all these folks after the Michigan loss have started to call him overrated and he was born on third base and stuff like that, I look at him and I look at Lincoln Riley out on the West Coast. And I look at Lincoln Riley's inability to ever evolve anything about his program, either at Oklahoma or now at USC defensively. They're not serious about it. They can say they are, but they're not intentional about it. Whereas Ryan Day is now winning games. His program's winning games in a manner they were incapable of winning games in 2 years ago. And to me, that's the sign of like an elite coach or an elite caliber coach, where you look at a side of the ball that you don't specialize in, but you go hire right, you delegate right, and you develop right and recruit right. And all of a sudden, they've had 2 games this year they didn't score more than 20 points in, and they're 2-0 in them. And we never would have said that about them in years past.
If I give you 2 teams, Team A, grade-wise, is an A offense, B defense. Team B, A defense, B offense. Which team are you taking? Both teams obviously good enough to win a championship. Which style of football in 2023 will get it done, though? Which one would you prefer?
So I still think I would go A, offense, B, defense. I think that's what I would say. But this particular year, I'm looking around. If you're telling me J.J. McCarthy is the dragon I have to slay, maybe I'm wrong. And I'm not speaking ill of him, but I am saying I think we know who he is as a player. I'm not a believer that just because you come back, you get 20% better in any given year as a player. So we've seen him. We've seen Michigan against the best. We largely, I think we know the cruising altitude that they're going to fly at. I don't necessarily know. I wish this was pre-recorded so we could edit all this out, but I don't know. Maybe I would like to be a defensive-minded team.
I mean, but the problem is in this hypothetical is if you grade Michigan, is it really A, offense, B, defense, right? Or is the Michigan defense actually the best part of that team? And it's just that now that J.J. McCarthy is much better, that all of a sudden they become that much more of a threat because now they're more complete. Right. So like I'm not sure. And granted, to be fair, I'm doing a lot of box score watching with Michigan. Yeah. I'm not locked in or done. Like I haven't locked in the film. I know all the numbers and everything. And but I'm Michigan, not sure the defense isn't their best part of their team.
No, in Michigan, it to me could end up being just a better version of Penn State in the sense of you got a talented quarterback, and I think a far superior quarterback. But do you believe, I'm not even questioning JJ. I may be opposite with you here, Josh. Like, I think JJ's a stud. Like, what he's done this year to me has been incredible strides from last year. But do they have the receiver talent? Like, that's the question for me. Can he win it on his own? Because they've gone against defenses that don't have the guys that can match up in the back end. Right. Ohio State seems like they can. Is JJ good enough to go against an elite defense with subpar average receivers? That's the question.
So that's the thing, the $1 million question that I keep wondering. I'm never the person who says Michigan hasn't played anyone, therefore they're not good. Because if I descended the Kansas City Chiefs into high school football, they'd still be the Chiefs, even though they're playing high school teams. So just because you haven't played anyone doesn't mean you're any good. But I do wonder, that's the whole crowbar and the bicycle spokes theory. If you've got above average receiver talent going against below average DB talent and they're balling, then all of a sudden they face elite perimeter skill defensively, it doesn't slow you down. It could make you stop completely and fly over the handlebars. And then, of course, you got a couple of running backs that can get the job done. You better hope they can, because otherwise your script that's worked all year is inverted really quickly.
All right, so let's move on from the Big Ten. Penn State falls, and then there were two. I think we're probably more excited forever for Ohio State, Michigan.